Good morning and Shabbat Shalom. It's a pleasure to have you with us, whether you're here in the Barg Sanctuary or watching from your home, from wherever that may be. Welcome to our Shabbat morning service at Beth Yeshurun and our first ever Shabbat Refreshed service. On this day, November 7th, 2020, we look forward to introducing a new service for you today. And you won't really notice any major differences really until the second part of our service, after our Torah service. And the cantor will introduce a different type of Musaf service we'll do today in the spirit of feeling refreshed and invigorated with spirit and energy that only Shabbat can bring us as Jews. Let us now open up our service and we turn to our Siddur Lev Shalem, or whatever Siddur you may have at home, to the beginning of the Shakari portion of our service. In the Siddur Lev Shalem, it's page 147, Shochenat.
שוכנת מרום וקדוש שמו וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני לא ישרים נאוות תהילה בפי ישרים תתהלל ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ומקלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפעל, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל ולקדש על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו ברכות והולאות מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות אל ההודאות אדוני נפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אל חי העולמים. We rise. יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמדי וחירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון וחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמירה ומברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם יוצר אור ובורא חושך עושה שלום ובורא את הכל.
You may be seated.
אפס ביתך גולנו לימות המשיח ואינו מלך המושיענו לתחיית המתים. 151 אל אדון על כל המעשים ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה קוטלו וטובו מעלי עולם דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו המתגאה על חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה תכות ומישור לפני כיסאו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה נאה זיוום בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים באימה רצון קונם ועד וכבוד נודנים לשמות סולה ודינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ליזרח אור ראה והתקין צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש. תתברך משה על שבח מעשה ידיך ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפרוך הסלע. 153. וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובתורה, בשירה ובזמרה ובזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים ומפארים ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך. להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ובנימה קדושה, כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. והאופנים בחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מתנשאים לעומת שרפים, לעומת המשבחים ואומרים, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. Two lines from the bottom. Or chalash al Zion ta'ir, v'nizke chulanu mera leoro, baruch ata Adonai yotzer ha'meoro. Middle of 154. V'avienu leshalom me'arba kanafot haaretz, v'tolichenu komemiyut le'artzenu, ki el poel yeshuot ata, uvanu v'charta mikol am belashon, Keira v'tanu l'shimcha gadol, sela sela be'emet, lehodot lecha, ul'yachedecha be'ahava, baruch ata Adonai, abocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Join together in the Shema, page 155. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha Hayom al levavecha, veshinantam levanecha v'nimarta bam, veshivtecha v'meitecha v'lechtecha v'derech, u'v'shochbecha u'kumecha, u'kshartam leot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha, u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha. Continue silently, page 156. If you're wearing a talit at home, it's time to take the 4 tzitzit in the corners of your garment, join them together, and join with me in the middle of the page. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta aleihem ve'asu lehem tzitzit al kanfei bigdeihem ledorotam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf petil techelet v'haya lachem letzitzit uritem oto u'scharetem et kol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. לדור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים וכיסו נכון, ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת. פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך. Middle of 158. משה ומירם ובני ישראל הכנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, נורא תהילות, עושה פלא. שירה חדשה, שמחה גואלים, לשמחה, לשמחה, על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו, ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Rise, סוד ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדה חינומך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
We join together with the opening blessings of the Shakari Tamida, page 159.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, אלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה, רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ולמתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו נשעני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומדום מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני חיי המתים. 161. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, עדין וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנשאים ליומת שרפים, ליומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים, ירושלים עירך לדור ודור, לדור ודור, ולנצח, ולנצח נצחים. בעינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. על ידי דוד, על ידי דוד, על ידי דוד, משיח צדקך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We continue silently in Hebrew or English from 162 to 166.
Please be seated as you conclude the Amidah. Continue with Kaddish Shalem, page 167. Yigdal v'kadash shemei rabah, ועל מדי ונחילותי, וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון ומלכון וחי לכל בית ישראל, מגלה בזמן קריב, ויאמרו אמן, יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מכל בחטא ושירתה ושבחתה ונחמתה לאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן יתקבל צלותנו ובאותנו כל ישראל קודם אבהוני וישמעיה ואמרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen.
And we're now ready to begin our Seder Kriyat HaTorah, our Torah service this morning. We turn to page 168 and we begin at the top of the page, Ein Kamocha.
אין כמוך באלוהים אדוני, ואין כמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום, אבל רחמים היטיב ברצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך אל רם ונישא אדון עולמים.
Please rise.
ויהי מנשוא אהרון, ויאמר משה, קומה אדוני, ויפוצו אויביך, וינוסו משנאיך מפניך, כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים, ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו, ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו, לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. Middle of 170. בינר החץ ולשמי קדישה, קדישה יקירה, הנאמר תושבחן. בינר החץ, בינר החץ, ולשמי קדישה, קדישה יקירה, הנאמר תושבחן. יהי רבה קודמך, דתפתח ליבי באורייתא, ותשלים משקלין דליבי, וליבה לכל עמך ישראל, לטבל חיים ולשלם. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. גדלו לאדוני איתי, ונרוממה Shemo Yachdav L'cha Adonai HaGedula HaGevura VeHaTiferet VeHaNetzach VeHaHod.
And you may be seated. And I invite you to open up your Chomashim to chapter 19 of the book of Genesis. In the Eitz Chaim commentaries, it's found on page 104. And here we arrive to one of the strangest scenes in the entire book of Genesis. It comes right after Abraham learns that God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, the evil cities. But Abraham, unlike Noah, debates with God, argues with God, and convinces God eventually not to destroy these two cities if at least there are 10 righteous people. And so the two angels arrive in Sodom to see if they can find a minion of 10 righteous people. We'll see something very different. They won't be a minion of 10 righteous people. In fact, they'll see a city bent on evilness, bent on doing awful things to pure strangers. And why is that so? And what happens when they come? We'll now open up the pages and look and see what happens. It's something very interesting right at the beginning. Abraham and Sarah, you may remember, prepare a great feast when the three angels visited them at the beginning of the Torah portion. You may remember the story. Abraham's recovering from his circumcision, and yet he's still there in the heat of the day at the opening of his tent, looking for strangers to help them, to serve them, to do whatever he can to help someone in need, fulfilling the mitzvah of Haknasat Orachim, welcoming the stranger. Lot does welcome these two angels, but instead of preparing for them a huge feast of all different types of food and getting his wife involved, it's something very interesting in verse 3. It says he does prepare a feast for them, but then he baked unleavened bread and they ate. Now, why would Lot be preparing matzah for these two angels? Remember, this is way before the Passover story. This is way before Joseph has gone down to Egypt. There is no Joseph. In fact, the Passover story won't happen for centuries later. Very interesting thread we see throughout our tradition that our ancient patriarchs and matriarchs, and even the nephew of a patriarch like Lot, knew that that was the time of Pesach. That according to the Midrash, Lot knew that that was the season when Pesach would eventually be celebrated. And so Lot naturally prepared matzah for his guest. He knew, even though he was just the nephew of Abraham, and even though Lot was far from perfect, he still knew, he had that spiritual insight that Pesach would one day be celebrated at that time. Again, we see the rabbis connecting the dots through the Midrashim, filling in the gaps of why the Torah gives us certain details, reminding us that according to our rabbinic tradition, there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. Everything is there for a reason. Even this somewhat obscure detail that Lot prepared unleavened bread. There's a reason why he did that. So let's now read and see what happens to these two angels, these strangers. How are they welcomed in Sodom? Chapter 19, verse 1, page 104.
Baruch Shenatan Tavani Israel Bigdushato V'atem Advekim Adonai Eloheichem Chayim Kolchem Hayam.
Yeah, I don't know how that could have disappeared. We'll just use this. Baruch et Adonai Hamvorah.
Baruch Adonai Barak Li'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bracha banu mikol amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Vayavo Shnei Malachim Sodom Ha'Ba'erev Elod Yoshev B'Shar Sodom Vayarlod Vayakom Nikvatam Vayishtach Ha'payim Arza Vayomer Hinei Adonai Suruna El Beit Avdechem, Belin Vrachat Suraglechem, Vishkam Tembalachtem V'darkechem, Vayomru Lo Kivarachov Nalin, Vayev Tzabamor, Vayasuru Ela, Vayavo El Beito, Vayas Lehem Mishto, Matzaraf Avayochelu, Terem, Ishkavu, Vanshe Hayir, Anshe Sodom Nasabal Abayid, Minar Viad Zaken Kolam Mikatzeh, Vayikru Elot, Vayomru Lo, Ayeh Hanashim, Asher Ba'u Elecha Halayla, Hotziei Meleinu, Vanedaotam, Vayetzei Aleihem, Lo Tapit Chavadelet Sagar Acharav, Vayomer Alna Achai Tareu, Hine Nali, Shte Banot, Asher Le'adu Ish Hotziana Eden Aleichem, Vasulahen Ketobi Nechem, Rak, Anashim Ha'el Alta Sudavar, Yalkein Bo B'tzel Kurati, Vayomeru Geshala, Vayomeru Achad Balagur Vayishpot Shafot, Ata Nalalacha Mehem, Vayitzu Bayish Belod Ma'od, Vayigshu Lishbar Hadalet, Vayishlechu Hanashim Et Yadam, Vayaviu Et Lot Alehem, Abaita Vadelet Sagaru, Et Hanashim, Asher Petach HaBayit, Ikubasan Vedrim Mikaton V'Yad Gadol, Vayilu Limtzo Petach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Baruch hu Adonai HaTorah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch le'olam
Baruch Adonai Baruch Li'olam V'ayed Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'kavanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Vayomeru ha'anashim elot, od milachafo, chatanu v'nechvnotecha, v'chol asher lecha erotzei min hamakom, ki mashkitim anachnu et hamakom hazeh, ki gadlat zakatam et b'nei Adonai, v'yeshachenu Adonai l'shachata, v'yetzei lod, v'yedaber el chatanav, lo chevenotav, v'yomer kumutzu min hamakom hazeh, Ki mashkit Adonai tahir, vayichim tzachek b'nei chatanav, uchema v'shachar Allah, vayitza malachim belot le'mor kum, kachadish techa, v'et shtei b'notecha, nimtzot penti safeh, ba'avon ha'hir, vayit mama, v'yachaziku anashim, Yadov Yad Ishto, Yad Shtei V'rota, Bechemlat Adonai Alav, Yotziu V'yanichu Mikutz La'ir, Vayi Chutzi Amotam Achutza, Vayomer Himaleit Nafshecha, Al Tabit Acharecha, V'al Tamod B'chol HaKikar, Ahara Himaleit Penti Safeh, Vayomer Lo Talehem, Ana Adonai Inena, Matzah Abdecha Chen B'yeinecha V'tagdel Chastecha Asher Asitem Adi Lacha Yodin Nafshi V'anochi Lo Chalim Alei Dara Pentit Bakani Arav Amati Hinena Hayir Azal Krova Lanu Shama V'hi Mitzar Imaltana Shama Halo Mitzar Yudchi nafshi, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Yamad shlishi.
And so now for this third Aliyah, we'll see the famous story when they're told not to look back. Lot is left with his wife and his daughters. The son-in-laws thought Lot was crazy, and they unfortunately stayed. But rest of them left, Lot and his 2 daughters and his wife, and they're told by God, don't look back. Don't look at what was, but look towards the future. But as we all know, Lot's wife turns around, and what happens? Of course, she turns into a pillar of salt. Now, why salt? Why not something else? Why salt in particular? There's many explanations the rabbis give us, but one I thought was very interesting is going back to when they were welcoming the guests, the 2 angels, at the beginning of our story this morning. Sodom was so evil that not only were you not allowed to help guests or strangers, it was punishable. In other words, you could be punished by the authorities, sometimes punishable by death, if you helped someone in need, if you helped someone on the street, if you helped a stranger. It was that evil of a city. And so according to this midrash, Lot didn't care what the law was. He was doing the right thing, and he was trying to get his wife help prepare the feast for these 2 angels, and he told his wife, put some salt on the food and make the food much tastier for these 2 guests. Well, Lot's wife wasn't happy that Lot was helping these strangers. She was afraid to stand up for what was right, and so she refused to put salt on the food for the guests. And so therefore, another few verses later, at this story's conclusion, she turns into a pillar of salt for failing to do the right thing. Let us continue now, chapter 19, verse 21, page 107.
Baruch et Adonai HaBarak.
Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarak Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'kamo b'kol amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ויאמר אליו, הנה נשאתי לפניך גם לדבר הזה לבלתי, אף כי הדבר אשר דיברת, מהר ימלט שמה, כי לא אוכל לעשות דבר עד בואך שמה, על כן קרא שם העיר צוער, השמש יצא לארץ ולא בו צרה. ואדוני המטיר על סדום, ועל עמורה גפרית ואש, מאת אדוני מן השמיים, ויהפוך את הערים האל, ואת כל הכיכר, ואת כל יושבי הערים בצמח האדמה, ותאבד אשתו מאחריו, ותהי נציב מלך, וישכם אברהם בבוקר, אל המקום אשר עמד שם מפני אדוני, וישקף על פני סדום ועמורה, ועל כל פני ארץ הכיכר. וירא והנה עלה קיטור הארץ כקיטור הכבשן, ויהי משחט אלוהים את ערי הכיכר, ויזכור אלוהים את אברהם, וישלח את לוט מתוך ההפכה בהפוך את הערים אשר ישב בהן לוט.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'ka'olam atah betokenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamot Revi.
Baruch et Adonai HaBarak.
Baruch Adonai HaBarak Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarak Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayal Lod mitzor vayeshe bahar ushte v'notav imo ki yarel shevet batzor vayeshe b'mara ushte v'notav v'atahomer abechid rahai el hatzira v'inu saken v'ish ein ba'aretz lavo aleinu kederech kol haaretz l'cha nashker avinu yayin v'nishkava imo v'nechayem yavinu sarah v'tashken ad avihen yayin b'layla ותבוא הבחירה, ותשכב אל אביה, וידע בשכבה ובקומה. ויהי ממחרת, ותאמר הבחירה אל הצירה הן, שכבתו אמש את אבי, נשקנו יין גם הלילה, וישכבי עמו, ונחיים יבינו זרה, ותשכנה גם בלילה, הוא ידביין יין, ותוקם הצירה ותשכב עמו, וידע בשכבה ובקומה, ותרענה שתי בנות לוט מאביהן, ותלדה בחירה בהם, ותקרא שמו מואב, הוא אבי מואב עד היום, והצירה גם היא ילדה בן, ותקרא שמו בן עמי, הוא אבי בני עמון עד היום.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Thanks, Tim.
Tamid Chamishi.
And now for this fifth Aliyah, we're going to see something that Abraham does again that he did a few chapters earlier. You may remember right after he was chosen by God, go to a land that I will show you. He goes with his wife Sarai at the time, but there's soon a famine in the land of Canaan, so they end up in Egypt. And what does Abraham do? He lies to Pharaoh. He lies to the leader of Egypt. He tells him that Sarah is not his wife, but it's his sister. He's afraid that she's so beautiful that they'll kill him and take Sarah as a bride. And the plan backfires, of course. At the beginning, Pharaoh does take her and then realizes that, you know what, I've done something wrong, that God starts to punish him. Well, the same thing's going to happen now. Abraham is now going to fib to a king named Abimelech. A little different circumstances here, different result. What happens is we'll see now in chapter 20. But a reminder, too, is Sarah's not a young woman, right? Sarah's not a 20-year-old woman, and Abraham feels he needs to lie and say she's so beautiful they're going to kill me if I say she's my wife. Remember, she's in her 90s at this point. And yet Sarah is so beautiful and inside and outside that he still feels he needs to fib and say that she's my sister, not my wife. It's a very interesting part of this story. So let's see what happens now. Chapter 20, verses 1 through 8, page 109.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayisa misham Avraham artsa negev, vayeshev ben kadesh uvenshur vayagor pikra, vayomer Avraham el Sarai ishto achoti, vayishlach Avimelech melech Gerar vayikach et Sarah, vayavo Elohim el Avimelech b'chalom halayla, vayomer lo in chamet al ha'isha shelakachta v'be'ulad Baal, Vavimelech lo karav eleh, vayamar Adonai agoy gam tzadik taharog, halo amar liachoti, v'gam hi amra achihu b'tom levavi, unikion kapaya siti zot, vayomer elav Elohim b'chalom, gam anochi yadati ki b'tom levavcha sita zot, vayachsao kam anochi otecha mechatoli, Akein lo netaticha lingoa eleh, v'ata ashev eshet ha'ish ki navihu, v'yid palel ba'adcha v'chei v'imeincha meshiv dakimo tamut, ata v'kol shelach v'yashkem Avimelech baboker, v'yikra lo chavadav v'yidaber et kol dvarim ha'ele b'yoznehem, Vayeru hanashim ma'od.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamot shishi.
So what happens, of course, is God communicates to Abimelech in a dream. Tells him what he's about to do is wrong. He's taken Sarah, who's actually a wife, not his sister. Don't do this. And Abimelech realizes he's made a mistake. God warns him before he can make a mistake through his dream, and he restores her to Abraham. And now we'll see in the 6th Aliyah on page 111, Abimelech goes to Abraham, why'd you lie to me? Why don't you just tell me the truth? I would have never taken Sarah if you would have just told me that she's your wife. And some very important words that Abraham says here. Abraham says, I thought, Ein yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh. I thought, surely there's no fear of God in this place. Let me point you right to the comment that Rabbi Kushner provides for us at the bottom of page 111. Couldn't say it any better. There's no fear of God in this place. Fear of God is the closest term in the Bible for what we call religion. It refers not to a theological position, for example, belief in God's existence or nature, or to an emotional state, fear of punishment, but to an awareness that certain kinds of behavior are unconditionally wrong. Unconditionally wrong. Yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh. Do people have a fear of God where you live, where we live? The Bible here, the Torah, is reminding us that ultimately this is what's most important about religion, perhaps, is that you want people to feel that there's something more important to what their needs are. There's something looking out for them. There's something that's expecting them to do better, that there is a God that expects us as human beings to take the higher moral ground, to do the right thing, to do things that can help others, even if we want to do it. Even if we don't want to do it, we still have to do the right thing. Yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh. Let us continue now the 6th Aliyah, page 111.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'notan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayikra Avimelech liAvraham. Vayomer lo, Nasita lanu mechatati lach. Keveit alai v'yamamachti chata gdola. Masima shelo yasu asita imadi. Vayomer Avimelech el Avraham. Ma ra'ita ki asita et hadavar hazeh. Vayomer Avraham. Ki amarti rak en yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh v'araguni al devar ishti v'gamam na achoti bat avi ach lo bat imi v'tehi le'isha v'yehi kasher hidu oti Elohim מבית אבי ואמר לה זה חסך אשר תעשי עמדי אל כל המקום אשר נבוא שמה אמי לי אחיהו ויקח אבימלך צאן ובקר ועבדים ושפחות ויתן לאברהם וישב לו את שרה אשתו.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher notan lanu Torah emes v'chayei olam d'tabet hakenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Actually, we have the 7th reading, don't we? We have the 7th first. Yeah. Okay. So let's pause for just a moment and offer a Misha Barach prayer, a prayer of healing for all those in our community and our families who are ill at this time. Misha Barach Avatenu Avram Yitzhak Yaakov Yivatenu Sarah Rivka Rachel V'Leah Hu Yerech Elima Ele Hazeh. May God bless our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah. Bring blessing and healing to the following individuals: Haya Leah bat Malcha Rachel, Davida Ariella bat Shifra V'Rahim Mordechai, Harav Yaakov Tzui ben Liba, Levi ben Gershon, Malcha bat Basha, Miriam bat Rachel, Moshe Pesach ben Fego, Moshe Aaron ben Yaakov, Nila Ora Garson, Bat Kohena Avraham, Penina Daniel, Bat Hana Budka, Pinchas Hirsch ben Miriam, Rachel bat Badia, Rachel Yafo ben Avraham Basara, Reuven ben Rachel Leah, Jim Adler, Sue Dilan den Alba, Crystal Ray Ambriz, Steve Betke, Brad Borden, Linda Brandt, Tracy Chaskin, Betty Freeman, Paula Ginsberg, Cindy Gold, Barbara Goldmar, Sheila Harrow, Dr. Evan Hirsch, Andrea Holland, Enid Knobler, Mary Leon, Isidore Rychak, Candace Rifkin, Irving Rose, Kate Davis Rosenbaum, Rose Rosenthal, Joel Sachs, Ron Sackheim, Scott Selzer, Alan Shapiro, Diana Richard Shapiro, Jeffrey Simon, Lucy Susie, Mimi Stein, Danielle Golan Tobias, Esther Weinstein, Aaron Koretsky, Bila Bat Shibra Pearl, Bill Greger, Bill Turner, Billy Laden, Chaim Laser Ben Taiba, Hannah Bat Tzvi, Daniela Bet Shalomit, Don Kobus, George Noon, Jared Hohendorf, Harav Yaakov Ben Tziva Ben Liba, Hershel Chaim Ben Hannah, Israel Ben Gittel, James Whitehead, Jalen Neser, Gragi Bat Tanya, Miguel Bat Tom, Rex Marco, Sarah Bat Yehudit, Sarah Gita Bat Freda, Jenna Bet Aster, Shana Hannah Bat Tova Rose, Shmuel Tzvi Halevi Ben Reisel, Tova Bat Rivka, Yosef Ben Mala. And let us take a moment now if you'd like to add a name of a loved one to yourself at this time. May the one who blessed our ancestors bring blessing and healing to all those individuals named. May they all have a speedy recovery, a refuah shlema, a complete healing of the mind, body, soul, and spirit. And let us say, Amen. We now continue with the seventh reading, page 112, verses 15 through 18. And we're honored to have Michael Richker with us, who will now read the seventh Aliyah and then the Maftor Aliyah and do the Haftorah for us as well. Thank you, Michael.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayomer Avimelech, Hinei artzi lefanecha, hatov ba'enecha shev. Usara amahar, Hinei natahati, elef kesef la'achiv, Hinei hulak kisut einayim lochol asher itach, ve'ekol v'nochachad, v'tikalel Avraham eta Elohim, v'yirpa Elohim, et Avimelech v'et Ishto, v'am hotav v'yeledu, ki atzor Adonai, ba'ad kol rechem levet Avimelech, al davar sarah, esher Avraham.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
And now let us rise for the Chetzi Kaddish.
יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
יברך חילותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתברך ויתמם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה מריחו לעילה מכל חטא ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ויאמרו
Amen. And you may be seated. And please be seated now as Michael reads the Maftir, page 112, chapter 20, verses 15 through 18.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam
Baruch
Va'ed.
Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Vayomer Avimelech, Hinei artzi lefanecha, batov ba'enecha shev. Usara amahar, Hinei natahati, elef kesef la'achiv, Hinei hulacha, kisut einayim locho asher itach, ve'eko v'nochachad, vayitpalel Avraham el ha'Elohim, vayirpa Elohim, et Avimelech v'yet ishto, v'am hotav v'yeledu, ki atzor Adonai, ba'ad kol rechem levet Avimelech, al davar sarah, esher Avraham. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayehi olam natat b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
We rise as the Torah is lifted. Yamod HaMagbiya v'Hagolel. V'exalt HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai.
Yad Moshe. Torah, 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 Torah. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. And you may be seated. So we have a very exciting Haftarah reading. We have a selection from the prophets. It's from the beginning of the second book of Kings. So if you ever wondered, by the way, where the stories of Elijah the prophet, who we recall every week on Saturday night when we say goodbye to the Sabbath, and at every bris and every Seder when we welcome Elijah to our Passover Seders. So the stories of Elijah appear at the end of the first book of Kings. And he had a disciple whose name was Elisha, and his stories appear at the beginning of the second book of Kings. And today we're reading those stories about Elisha, Elijah's disciple. He's going to do two miracles today. One for a woman who was living a comfortable life. It seems her husband was among the disciples of the prophets, so he probably earned at least an okay living. But then he died, and she's now a widow with children and has no source of income, and the creditors are taking everything away, including her children. And she is desperate, and she calls out to the prophet Elisha she needs some help. And he provides her with miraculous assistance, which I'll let you read about. The second story is a wealthy woman. She's married and is doing quite well, and she offers Elisha comfort and works with her husband to provide a special room for Elisha so that whenever he's in town, he will stay with them upstairs in his own special room. And every time he comes to visit, she provides for him. And one day he says to her, "What can I do for you?" And she says, "Well, my husband is very old and we don't have any children." And he says, "Next year, you will have a child." And she says, "Come on, I'm old." So if this sounds sort of parallel to what we read in the Torah portion with Abraham and Sarah, that's why this Haftarah was chosen. In any case, she does have a child. And then one day he goes out in the field and his head hurts. We might say he either had a seizure or some other kind of a thing, and the child dies. And so she runs off to Elisha, begging help. She says, "You promised me a child, and now he's gone. What can I do?" And Elisha performs another miracle. He brings the boy back to life. Today, the process that is described in the Bible, we might call mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. In any case, it's page 124, the prophet Elisha, and today Michael is reading the Haftarah because it is the 70th anniversary of his bar mitzvah. And so Michael Richker is going to read for us his bar mitzvah Haftarah, right? It's in honor of, anyway, your 70th bar mitzvah. So he's going to read it today for us. Page 124.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratzah v'tivraham hanemorim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'yeh ha'emet b'tzedek v'isha achat min shei b'nei hanvi'im Saka el Elisha lemor Avzaka ishi made Vata ya data ki Avzaka ya re etanai Mahano shebam La kachad et shene yiladalo La avadim Vayomer Elecha Elisha Maha Eselach Hagidi Li Maha Yeshlach Babayit Vatomer Ein Lashif Chatachacho Babayit Ki Imasuv Shaman Vayomer Lachi Sha'alilach Alim Min Hachutz Me'et Kol Shachenayich Kalim Rekim Al Tam Iti Uvad Vasagat Hadelet Ba'adei Uvat Banayik Biatak Al Kol HaKelim Ha'elech V'Hamei Malei Tasi V'Telek Me'ito V'Tizgor Hadelet Ba'adam Uvat Baneim Magishim Elaha V'Hi Motzaked V'Yehi Kimlot HaKelim Vatomer El Bana Hagisha Elai On Keli Vayomer Eleha Ein Ot Keli Vayamot Hashamen Vatavo Vategei Leish Elohim Vayomer Lachi Mikri et Hashemen Veshami et Nisheich Ga'ad Huvanayich Tichi Banotav Vayehi Hayom Vayavor Elisha El Shunaim Vasham Isha Gedolah Vatachazebo Lechalachem Vayehi Medei Avro Yasur Shama Lechalachem Vatomer El Isha Hinena Yadati Ki Ish Elohim Kadoshu Ovein Aleinu Tamid Naasena Aliyat Kir Katana Vanasim Lo Sham Bitah Bashokhan Bakise Notara Bahaya Bavo Oho Elenu Yasur Shama Vayehi Hayom Vayavo Shama Vayasar El Ha'aliyah Vayishkaf Shama Vayomer El Kekazi Na'aro Karam Ashuna Mit Hazon Vayikra Pata'amot Fadav Vayomer Lo Emetna Eleha Hine Harta Eleinu Et Kol Hacharada Hazon Me Lasod Lach Hayesh Ladabir Lach El Hamelech Om El Shar Hatzavam Vatomer Vatochami Anochi Shavet Vayomer umel asot la Vayomer kechazi Avah Bein ein lam Veisha zakein Vayomer karala Vayik ralach Vata'amot Bapatach Vayomer lamoed haseh Ka'et chaya At Havoked Bein Vatomer Al Adonai Ish Elohim Al Takazeh Vashif Katacham Vatahar Ha'isha Vatelet Bein Lamoed Hazeh Ka'et Chaya Asher Diber Elacham Elisham Vayigdal Hayaled, Vayehi Hayom, Vayeseh El Aviv, El Hakos Rurim, Vayomer El Aviv, Roshi, Vayomer El Hanar, Sa'ehu El Imo, Vayisaehu, Vayviehu El Imo, Vayeshev Al Birkeha, Ad Hatzarayim, Vayamon, Vatah, Vatashkivehu, Al Mitach, Isha Elohim, Vatisgor, Ba'ado, Vatetzeh, Vatikara, Elisha, Vatomer, Shilchad, Na'aliachad, Min Harim, Va'achat, Ha'atanon, Varutza, Ad Isha Elohim, Va'atshuva, Vayomer, Maduam, at holechet I love hayom, lo chodesh v'lo Shabbat, vatomer shalom. Vatakavosh ha'aton, vatomer el na'ara nahag valech, al ta'atzar li lerkov, ki im amarti lach, vatelech. Vatavo el ish Elohim el har hakarmel, vayehi kirot isha Elohim ota mineked, vayomer el gechazi na'aro hine. Hashunami lav ata rutzna likrata emet lam hashalom la hashalom la ishech hashalom la yalet vatomer shalom vatavo el ish Elohim el har vatachazem barak lav vayigash gechazim L'chadfav yomer ish Elohim harpela kinaf sham harla v'Adonai Elohim imeni lo higit li v'tomer hashalti vein meit Adonai alo amarti lo tashle oti v'yomer lekechazi chagog matnecha v'kach Mishanti v'yadacha v'alech ki dimsa ish lo tavarchenu v'ki yuvarechacha ish lo ta'anenu v'samta mishanti al penei hana'ar v'tomer eim hana'ar Chai Adonai v'chei nafshecha im ezbecha v'yachem tam v'yelef acharecha v'gechazi avar lifneim v'yasem et hamish enet al penei hana'ar v'yein kol v'yein kahasher v'yashav likra'oto v'yaget lo le'mor lo heikint hana'ar v'yavo Elisha habayit v'hinei hana'ar meid mushkav al mitato v'yavo v'yishgor hadelet ad shaneihem v'yifalel el Adonai v'yam v'yishkav al hayelen v'yasem Piv al piv, einav al einav, chipav kapav, vayikar alav, vayacham ashar hayalen, vayasham, vayelech babayid, achad heinav, vayam, vayikar alav, vazorer hanar, at shevat pa'amim, vayivka hanar, et einav, Vayikra el gechazi vayomer kara el hashunami mazol vayikra echa vatavo elah vayomer sheifanei vatavo vatipo al raglav vatish tachum arsa vatisa et bana vateksei Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sur kol ha'alamim tzaddik b'chol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'yoseh ha'mdaber kayem shakol devarav emet v'tzedek Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha v'davar echad mitvarecha achor lo yashuv rekam ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata baruch ata Adonai ha'enel ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav Rachaim al Sion ki beit chayenu vala aluvat nefesh toshia bimheira v'yameinu baruch ata Adonai v'sameach Sion b'vanecha Sabcheinu Adonai Eloheinu, Be'eliyahu Hanavi Vavdecha, Uvmalchut Beit David Mashichecha, Bimhera Yavo V'yagel Libenu, Al Kisolo Yeshev Zar, V'lo Yinchalu Od Acherim Et Kavodo, Ki V'shem Kodshacham, Nishbatalom, Shelo Yichbech Dero Leolam Va'ed, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen David. Al HaTorah, V'al HaAvodah, V'al HaNvi'im, V'al Yom HaShabbat Hazeh, Shenatata Lanu, Adonai Eloheinu, L'Tusha V'Limnucha, L'Chavod U'Tifaret. Al HaKoh, Adonai Eloheinu, Anachnu Mohodim Lach, Umvarchim Otach, Yitbarach Shimcha, B'fi Kol Chai, Tamid Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Ata Adonai, Makadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Michael, thank you. Always a pleasure to have you read Torah, have Torah for us, especially on this important occasion. Hard to believe the 70th anniversary of your bar mitzvah. So yishkoch, Michael, on a job well done. And now let us continue for a prayer for the United States and Israel and our armed forces. Almighty God and high omnipotent King, look down from your heavenly abode and bless the United States of America. May our leaders strive to establish justice and opportunity for all, and may they be successful in bringing peace to the family of nations. May your favor rest upon our beloved state of Israel, its land and all who dwell therein. Protect Israel from war and hatred, and may our Jewish state bring comfort to those who seek refuge, light to those who dwell in darkness, and new hope to all humanity. We ask your blessings upon the valiant servicemen and women of the American military forces and the Israel Defense Forces, who risk their lives to protect the welfare of all your creation. Be their shelter and fortress, and do not allow them to falter. Fill their hearts with faith and courage. Protect them on land, in the air, and on the sea. Guide them in peace, lead them toward peace, and return them speedily to their families, alive and unharmed, and to let us stay together. Amen. So it's a pleasure to have our next week's bat mitzvah. We haven't had this custom in a while. We're bringing it back with Maddie Sweden, who's here with her parents, sisters, and grandmother. And next week, she'll officially become a bat mitzvah. And so the tradition, of course, of Beth Yeshurun is the week before your bat mitzvah to come, get a little practice, and lead us in the Oshrei prayer. We turn to page 181.
Ashrei Yoshrei Veitecha, Od Yehallelucha Selah.
Ashrei Am Shekacha Lo, Ashrei Am Shalomai Eloha.
Techila le David, Aramimcha Elochaicha Melech, Va'avarcha Shimcha le'olam va'ed.
V'chol Yom Avarochecha, V'alala Shimcha le'olam va'ed.
Gadol Adonai umchulel me'od, Ve'ligdulaton ein cheker.
Dori Dori Shabbat Masecha, Ugvurotecha Yagidu.
Hadar kevochodecha, V'divrei niflotecha asicha.
Ve'zuz Norotecha Yomeinu, Ugvulatcha Asaprena.
Zecher Rav Tucha Yabiu, V'tzitchacha Yeranenu.
Chanun Baruchu Adonai, Erech Habayim Gdol Chased.
Tov Adonai lakol, V'rachamav al kol ma'asav.
Yoducha Adonai kol ma'asecha, V'chasidecha yevarchucha.
Kivod malchutecha yomeru, Ugvuratecha yedaberu.
Lehodia livnei Adam gvurotav, V'chvor Adar malchuto.
Malchutecha malchut kol amim, Umemshaltecha bechol dor vador.
Somech Adonai lechol hanoflim, V'zokef lechol hakfufim.
Einechol elecha yisaberu, Ve'ata noten lahem et ochlam be'ito.
Poteach et yadecha, U'matzbiya lechol chayrotzo.
Tzadik Adonai bechol dehrachav, V'chatzi bechol ma'asav.
Karov Adonai lechol korav, Lechol asher yikra'u be'emet.
Ritzon Yereyav Yaseh, Ve'et Shavatam Yishma V'yoshiyem.
Shomer Adonai et kol ahavav, Ve'et kol harshaim yashmid.
Techilat Adonai Yedaber Pi, Yivarech Kol Basar Shem Kodsho Le'olam Va'ed. ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah.
Now please rise as we return the Torah to the Ark, page 183. And thank you, Maddie, for a job well done.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו. הודו על ארץ ושמיים, וירם קרן לעמו, תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל, עם קרובו, הללויה. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם.
And you may be seated.
Shabbat Shalom. Generally speaking, most years that there is an election on a Tuesday, by the time Shabbat rolls around, you know, with basically no room for the possibility of a debate, who won. Most years. But we live in 2020, so, all bets are off. Now, unlike the election, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was giving the sermon today, because we plan these things out very far in advance. But I was stuck in a rather difficult position, because, you gotta write this thing out before Shabbat. And all week I kind of kept putting off writing this, hoping that at some point it would be decided what was going to happen, electorally speaking. Because then if that happened, then finally, I could write. I would know what basis from which to write a sermon. Would there be a big change? Would there not be a big change? That seemed really important to know before I did this, but Wednesday morning rolled around, and Wednesday night, and then Thursday morning, and there just kept being nothing definitive happening. And eventually, you just gotta write the dang thing. Shabbat is gonna come. It's gonna start, more importantly, and then even if something decisive does happen, you literally can't write about it anymore. So I had to write something. But how? I thought to myself, how could I deliver a sermon, a message to the congregation full of relevance for this extremely unique time that we find ourselves in, with so much uncertainty still hanging in the air? But then I remembered. Then I realized that no matter how this thing shakes out, the sermon that you give after this election is the same. I want you to think right now. Close your eyes if you have to. Picture in your mind the faces of your family and your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers. I'm doing the same thing. Some of them, they voted like us, and some of them did not. And all of them will still be our family and our friends and our neighbors and our coworkers after this is resolved. No election changes that fact. Our community is still our community. This is where we live. These are our people. For better or worse, these are our people. And these relationships that we have with them, with each other, they're sacred. Literally, they are holy. Our Torah and our prophets and our most ancient rabbis, they kind of harp on this. They kind of literally can't stop talking about the sanctity of relationships. And they say it's because relationships, friendships, are a matter of life or death. There's a very famous man in the Talmud. We love to tell stories about him. His name is Honi, the circle maker. Rabbis love the story about the carob tree and the guy walking along. They love to tell that story on high holidays. I did that, for example. But the story of Honi, the circle maker, actually goes on after that. He falls asleep at some point during his adventures, falls asleep for 70 years. It's a long time to sleep. And when he wakes up, everybody he knows is dead. And he wanders through the village, and it's really actually sad reading the story in the Talmud about him. He wanders through the village, and he recognizes the descendants of people he knew, but it's not them because they're gone. And those people don't recognize him. And he goes to the study hall that he used to hang out with his friends. And no one there recognizes him because they're not his friends. They don't know who he is. And he gets upset. And the Talmud tells us that he gets so upset that all those people, all those relationships are gone. He gets so upset that he dies. It's a rather dark end to the story of Honi. And our ancient rabbis tell us this story about him to explain what is apparently a very common folk saying back then, chavruta o metuta, meaning friendship or death. Which is to say, and they explain, that a person who does not be in living in relationship with other people, if you're not in relationship with other people, you're in a kind of living death. We don't just need other people, our rabbis say. We need other people to live a life worth living. I'm not trying to be morbid here. I just think it's really important to note now, more than ever, that our tradition implores us to remember that our relationships with our family, with our friends, with the people that we are surrounded by, with the people we have built our lives with and around, those relationships are holy. And like every holy thing, they require care and time, patience, respect, and love. So if you haven't, now might be a good time to check in with your people, those who voted like you and those who did not vote like you. Not to rehash the news, everybody's got a phone, so you don't need to do that. But to say hi. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What do you need? And just sit together, socially distant, virtually, whatever, sit together. And just be together. Because then you're saying, I care about you and our relationship. Because ultimately, our job as Texans, as Americans, as Jews, is to be God's partner in this continual process of creation. Hasidic Jewish mystical thought holds that the world was created broken, and the whole reason we exist is to help put it back together. I don't need to tell you, I don't need to enumerate all the ways in which the world is broken right now. You know it. You have eyes, you have ears, you know it. There's a lot of brokenness right now. There's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of need. There's a lot of fear, and there's too much anger as well. And we are at our best, our most divine, as Jews and as Americans, when we focus on healing and on justice and on joy for ourselves and for and with those with whom we live in holy relationship. May God bless us all, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. For many, many years, I've had the privilege of leading Musaf services at congregations in Europe and in the United States. And since coming to the United States, I have been cantor at conservative synagogues. And I've always wondered how it is and why it is that Friday night services, we have happy music. We have a band. We want to make the services more beautiful than usual. And why is it we do it for Friday night and we don't do it for Shabbat morning? So, considering what we have been going through in our synagogue, in our community, and in the country in this 2020, a very, very weird and difficult year, Rabbi Strauss and I had a long discussion about how we could refresh our services. What can we do to bring something new and fresh into our Musaf service? So we came up with the idea that we will take the best of these beautiful prayers and we will have our Friday night renewal band join in these beautiful services and these beautiful prayers. So I invite you to open up your Siddur, and we will begin with page 189, Yismachu. And please feel free to join in whether you are here or at home.
ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו מלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. עמם מקדשי מקדשי שבי שבת, כולם ישבעו ויתענגו מטוב שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת, חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר מעשה בראשית שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת.
And we turn to page 190 with this beautiful prayer of Al-Qulam. And this prayer of Al-Qulam follows another prayer which we call Modim. And in the prayer Modim, we thank God for all the great things that we should be happy about and we should be thankful for. And this prayer of Al-Qulam means for all of these things, we should bless you.
Al-Qulam.
1 second, I have to get the right key.
Al-Qulam Al-Qulam Yitbarach V'yitromam Yitbarach V'yitromam Shimcha Malkeinu Tamid Le'olam Va'ed B'chol HaChayim Yoducha Selah V'yihallelu Et Shimcha Be'emet Ha'el Yeshuateinu Ve'ezrateinu Ezrateinu Selah Ve'al-Qulam Ve'al-Qulam Yitbarach Ve'yitromam Yitbarach Ve'yitromam Shimcha Malkeinu Tamid Le'olam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Atov Shimcha Atov Shimcha Ulecha Naeh Naeh
Now we turn to page 191 for the beautiful prayer for peace, Sim Shalom.
Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha, Chen v'chesed v'rachamim Aleinu ועל כל ישראל עמך עמך ברכנו ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד ברכנו ברכנו אבינו באור פניך שים שלום טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך עמך כי באור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו תורת חיים ואהבת חסד ואהבת חסד וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום שים שלום טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך עמך וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך שים שלום טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו על כל ישראל. עמך, עמך.
And in honor of this very, very special Shabbat morning, I wrote a new version of En Eloheinu, which I hope you will enjoy, and I hope might become the standard En Eloheinu for Beth Yeshurun.
En Eloheinu, en Adonenu, en Malkeinu, en Moshienu, mich Eloheinu, mich Adonenu, mich Malkeinu, mich Moshienu. Lai, 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 la, 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 lai, 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 la, 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 lai, 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 la, 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 lai. Lai, 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 la, 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 lai, 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 la, 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 lai. Nodel Eloheinu, nodel Adonenu, nodel Malkeinu, nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu. Lai, 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 la, la, lai, 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 la, la, lai, 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 la, la, lai, 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 la, la, lai, lai. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shehiktiru Avoteinu. Lefanecha Ektornet Hasamim.
We rise as the ark is opened for Aleinu L'Shabeach.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומשב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אלות, אמת מלכנו וזולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינות. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
And now we invite all those in mourning and all those observing a yurtzeit to continue with the words of the Mourner's Kaddish, which is found on page 207. Yitzgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yamad divrach yirteh v'yamlik malchuteh, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayeh dekol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam omei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh V'yetadar, v'yetalev, v'yetalal, shemei dekudusha, brichu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiram v'yama v'yimru, amen. Yehi shlamba rabba min shemaya, alim elena v'yakol Yisrael v'yimru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yimru, amen. Well, thank you, Cantor Finkelstein. That was beautiful, and the members of our Shabbat Renewal Band as well. It's great to see you on a Saturday morning. That was what we needed, I think. And what a week it's been, what a year it's been, and just to enjoy the melodies, the beautiful tunes of our eternal prayers. And I love that new Ein Eloheinu. I think we got to do that, incorporate that in sooner than waiting to the next Shabbat refreshed. So that was phenomenal. It's a reminder to us just how blessed we are to have someone like Cantor Finkelstein with us at Beth Yeshurun that not only leads us in prayer every Shabbat, but also is just an incredible writer of music and has written so many of the melodies that are not only, of course, used here, but in conservative and reform and even some modern Orthodox synagogues across North America and even parts of the world. So we truly are blessed. So thank you, Cantor Finkelstein. And we look forward to future Shabbat refreshed. I hope everyone does feel refreshed. And speaking about refreshed, it's a great time of year to go outside. And here in Houston, we are fortunate, God willing, this will be a good winter for us. When it comes to the pandemic, we want to take advantage. It's a time of year we can go outside more than we can stay inside. So our next Shabbat Renewal Outdoors will be on Friday night, November 27th, just a few weeks away. That's the Friday of Thanksgiving week. I want to thank the Albert and Ethel Herstein Charitable Foundation for giving us a grant just this week for supporting all the expenses involved in our Shabbat Renewal outdoor services. We're planning on doing several of them in the next couple of months, and the next one, as I mentioned, will be November 27th. Speaking of Thanksgiving week, we are having a Thanksgiving to go, just like we did Passover to go meals. We had a lot of success with it. This one will be open to members and non-members. So if you're not having that big Thanksgiving meal and you don't feel like with all kinds of people at your house and there's not someone bringing the stuffing and someone bringing the dessert, but you're all just you and your family and it's just too much work, order from our catering department. They're great meals. It's traditional Thanksgiving turkey meal, kosher with all of your favorite sides, and of course my favorite, pumpkin pie. So look on our website for that. We've got a lot of great programs and events happening in the next couple of weeks. Go to our website. There's all kinds of classes, educational opportunities, and I want to make point of two things happening this Thursday that I'll be involved with. We're inviting one of my heroes, Aaron Berry, who's now a senior in high school, to have lunch with me this Thursday, our Lunch and Learn program. And we're going to speak about it to Aaron, about how he's overcome his challenges. He's already received a full scholarship to the University of Alabama to play on their nationally ranked wheelchair basketball team. And I think you're going to want to see how Aaron's doing. He's an incredible young man. So join me this Thursday for lunch at noon. And then later on in that evening, I'll be having a conversation with Jennifer Teague. I just finished her book. It's called My Grandfather Would Have Shot Me. A black woman discovers her family's Nazi past. Her grandfather was the awful commander of the concentration camp depicted in Schindler's List. How did she discover this incredible fact and this awful, awful family history that she uncovered as an adult? You want to hear her story? That will be this Thursday evening. Rabbi Morgan has several great classes of the Jewish Learning Project. Rabbi Ford has several programs coming up. Go to our website for all the information. And finally, speaking of our cantor, as I mentioned earlier, this Monday, the Cantors Assembly will be hosting a series of interviews with prominent cantors throughout the country. They'll be meeting with Cantor Finkelstein this Monday evening. So enjoy that as well. Go to our website for all the information. And finally, I do want to mention one more program, very important program we have this month, our annual Sisterhood Torah Fund. But this time it will be virtual. They're in partnership again with the Evelyn Rubenstein Jewish Community Center. Author and radio host Tommy Schnurmacher will entertain and will raise important funds to support scholarships at conservative Masorti institutions of higher learning. The Torah Fund raises a lot of important money for my rabbinical school that I went to and other conservative rabbinical schools It's actually a really, really good program this year. Even though it's virtual, you want to be there. It's Tuesday, November 17th at noon, and you can go online for all the information and to make your very important donation for the sisterhood. And with that, I think we're ready to bring our service to a close. The cantor will first lead us in a Don Olam, followed by the Kiddush and the Hamotzi.
Adon Olam asher malach beterem kol yetzir nivra leitnasa bechefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora vehu haya vehu hove vehu yeh בתפארה והוא אחד ואין שני להמשילו להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמסרה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא להתנשא חפץ הכל אזי מלך שמו נקרא והוא אלי וחי גואלי בצור חבלי מיצרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו אבקי רוחי והייתי שם ויעירה רוחי גבייתי אדוני לי ולא וירא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא להתנשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא.
Now let us rise for the Kiddush and the Hamotzi.
Al-Qulam Baruch Adonai Yom HaShabbat v'Yikadshehu Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Good Shabbos, everyone.